Welcome to the Alameda County Pod Training Module for the Planning section. As a member of the planning team at a point of dispensing site, you have an important role in making the pod successful. The planning section is the essential record-keeping partner of operations, just as finance is the record keeper for logistics. The planning section serves two important primary functions: documentation management and situational analysis. These are complementary functions because, as forms are collected, they can be used to monitor operations and calculate rates of flow. The documentation group's mission is to manage all paperwork that supports and records pod operations. This includes all patient paperwork and ICS forms. Receipts and injury or damage reports, on the other hand, should end up with finance. Forms that you'll get to know well include the patient information form, shift schedules, and the many ICS forms. Patient information forms are critical to the dispensing mission because they serve as both legal FDA documents and patient sorting forms. The patient information requirements will be unique to each incident. The template will come to you from your city EOC. Shift schedules for pod staff should be created by planning in collaboration with logistics and then be approved by command. ICS forms are available as templates from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They can be used as they are or customized by your city EOC. Planning has a special relationship with ICS forms because you'll not only use them, but also collect and collate them to carry out your mission. At a full pod activation, which includes startup and shift changes, the documentation group takes charge of sign-in using the ICS check-in and out form number 211. Smaller pods may only have a personnel unit leader and a sign-in sheet. Other common forms are used by all units. For instance, ICS Form 213 is a message form you can use to make a request or get a message to anyone else in the pod. ICS Unit Log 214 is a record of each unit's activities. These forms and the others are important not just during an emergency, but after. They become the evidence base documenting the event and helping your community qualify for reimbursement. Once these forms are used in the pod for their intended purposes, they're collected by the documentation group, but their work isn't finished because they become important tools for the other side of planning, the situational analysis group. The situational analysis group uses the documentation to analyze pod operations for status reporting and contingency planning. While almost everyone else in the pod is consumed moment to moment by their work, your role on situational analysis is to look ahead to anticipate problems that impact the success of the mission. You should work with command staff to establish information requirements and reporting schedules. One of the group's first goals should be to compile and display incident status information in the command area. Set up a status board that shows your pod's target throughput, both the estimated total number of people and the target rate. This is essential in a time-critical event because pod rule number 1, speed equals survival, can only be effective if you know the speed. To calculate the speed, or rate of flow, count the number of people on the patient information forms and divide by the total elapsed time it took for them to pass through the pod. For instance, suppose that a pod with 1,200 doses of medication dispenses 300 of those in the first hour. So for that hour, the rate is 300 persons per hour. But the rate increases the second hour to 500 doses. How much longer can the pod operate before getting more medication? The situational analysis group can use similar calculations to monitor and project many other trends, like ramp-up speed for new staff, speed of the express track versus the assistance track, or the amount of medication needed for the next shift. If the pod is falling behind in any area that can cause a problem, you should inform the pod site manager and prepare alternative strategies. As part of your contingency planning, you should also monitor the weather forecast and prepare for rain or any other weather complications. Contingencies might include staff travel and parking, redirecting the line so that the public is under cover, erecting outdoor tents, or ordering heaters. Of course, following up to make sure that the tents arrive is also important, especially if contingencies occur across shifts. For each alternative strategy, you should make sure you know the resources needed, resource availability, and the cost, both in dollars and people. Additionally, you should determine if alternate plans are precluded by any policies or regulations. Remember that all client paperwork is private under HIPAA laws. The planning section chief keeps the pod site manager informed about how the pod is doing and identifies potential staffing and supply concerns. Regular meetings should occur in the pod to share status updates. The planning section chief should serve as the facilitator and coordinate the meetings and submission of unit logs. At regularly scheduled times, often shift changes, a designated person in the planning section reports progress up the chain of command to your city EOC. If your pod's large enough, the planning team might add a resource unit or a demobilization unit. In smaller pods, these responsibilities will be carried out by the regular planning staff. A resource unit would work directly with the logistics section on tracking pod staff assignments and supplies. They would conduct the check-in and check-out procedures, and time permitting, they would determine qualifications and identify expert skill sets of staff for better assignment or redeployment. The demobilization unit would focus on releasing excess staff and resources early if appropriate, and would make sure that the regular outgoing staff is demobilized efficiently. Once the decision is made to end the operation and close the pod, the demobilization team should be ready with an effective demobilization plan. Remember that your role on the planning team makes a difference. While other staff are performing ongoing operations, your team is responsible for tracking the progress and anticipating problems. The rest of the pod staff are counting on you to think ahead. Thanks for your extra effort. This pod video training series is brought to you by the Alameda County Public Health Department, Office of Public Health Emergency Preparedness, in collaboration with Applied Creative Training, Inc.